Welcome to Obsession Engineering, and I might sound chirpy and cheerful, but inside I'm not, because I've got to work on that, and that is the worst motorcycle I have ever owned. But it does need fixing so that we can, together, fight cancer. So to anybody who may have missed the introduction to the worst motorcycle I've ever owned, I shall recap for you. I have signed up to do the longest day challenge. So on the 23rd of June this year, I'm going to be riding this terrible Honda DeVille from Land's End to John O'Groats in a day with no motorways. The course, the route even, that is not actually set yet, will be 1,000 miles of, well, riding this, I'm hoping, reliable but incredibly dull motorcycling. And at some point it'll get uncomfortable and I'll hate life. But we're doing it for Cancer Research UK, so that is a good thing. Part of the challenge is to do the longest day route on a bike that costs no more than £600. Turns out £600 doesn't buy very much nowadays, but this was even less. This was £300, and with good reason. It's nasty. It's got some patina on it, it's got some gaffer tape on it, it's got quite a lot of rust and stuff on it, and it hasn't, and it's got one of the exhaust pipes hanging off it. Since it's been sat in the workshop, one of the fork seals is also leaking, and it won't start, and the list goes on. So I have been shopping for some bits for it. So I'm hoping to actually get the bike back on the road for under £600. Now, the budget for brakes and tyres is free of the restrictions in the budget because the bikes need to be safe. It will need a fresh MOT, but now I do at least have a V5 for it. But we have here some brake pads. All the calipers on this bike appear to be the same, and all of them have very, very, very knackered brake pads in them. I have an exhaust pipe, which was £30 delivered from eBay. An air filter, some spark plugs. I also have, on the shelf behind me, an oil filter and some Motul oil, so it will be well catered for in the lubrication front. I also have for it a set of tyres, because the ones that are on it are completely shot. In the rear one I can even see the canvas. Right, these are Continental Conti Motions, which I'm guessing might be made in China, because they were disturbingly cheap for a pair of tyres. But they are in budget, and they're black and round, so they'll be considerably better than the ones that are in it now. So when I say I've found some motivation to actually work on Honda, at some point I actually have to work on it because it's not going to fix itself, unfortunately. And today I'm going to crack on with it for about 45 minutes before I go racing. So at least I'm going to start. And then once I've started, it's much easier to get motivated to carry on because it will be in bits in the workshop, and then I have to do it because it's in the way. There is logic here, you see. So I think the plan for today is to rip bodywork and bits off it and see how bad it is underneath. It may come as no surprise that I've never worked on a DeVille before because I generally work on race bikes. And this is about as far removed from a race bike as you can get. It's heavy, it'll be slow, but it has got a very aerodynamic fairing. Ish. So I need to get the bodywork off it, and there is a lot of bodywork to come off it, so I've selected the appropriate tools from the toolbox. We have Allen keys, screwdrivers, and a hammer. But because we're going to be working precisely today, it's only the small hammer. But the thing I'm going to start with is actually the penknife, because I'm going to cut off the gaffer tape that's holding the panniers on. Because this seems considerably quicker than trying to peel it off. There. Excellent. First bit done. There's a hole in my Honda. Look! I have heard a rumour that the French police used to have DeVilles purely so they could get their baguette in the hole. I like it. And I suppose if it's a really, really windy day and you wanted to let some air through in a crosswind, you could just take the pannier sides off. Clever thinking Honda. So merely moments into the project and I've already come across the first seized bolt. As I say, it's actually rounded off. It does move, but it only moves the wrong way because the drive pulling it this way is done. So I'm not going to fuss around, I'm just going to get the drill on it. Right, head removed from bolt. In my head, this panel should just sort of come off now, but it doesn't. So there must be other things attaching it. I may have to go and get the hammer. Turns out there was a bolt, a little screw in there, so I've taken that out, and then I realised I need to take the seat off it to get to the bolt that sits there behind the grab rail, and then also realised I needed to undo the little panel here that literally just clips into place. And look how nice it is under here. Beautiful. So, if I actually take all of the fasteners off, there is a fighting chance that this lump of bodywork might actually come off. So I can at least now actually access some of the bits of the bike I need to work on. I can get to the brake caliper and I can see the nut for the back wheel, which is behind the exhaust, which is slightly awkward. I'm guessing you can probably loosen the exhaust and move stuff around, but being as I have to take quite a lot of the stuff apart yet anyway, it's not the end of the world. That back tyre, I like to get mileage out of a tyre, but I think that one's about done. So it's a good job we've already got some new ones. So I'm trying to keep the video nice and light-hearted because, let's face it, if you're not laughing, you're probably crying working on one of these. But the reason we're actually doing the bike up is to go and raise money for Cancer Research UK. And cancer, let's face it, we're not going to be laughing about that because that's a horrible thing that takes over people's lives and ruins families. So if you want to join me in fighting against cancer, then you can click on the fundraising button thing that I've put in the corner on the link and you can give me some money. Now I'd like to say a big thank you already to the people who've donated after the first video. I am trying to hit £10,000 because more money equals more fighting against cancer. So far we're a bit over £3,000, so it's going pretty well, but it can always go better. So if you're one of the people who've already given us money, then thank you massively. I've read all the comments. Thank you so much for committing to the cause. If you've not donated yet, even if it's £1 or £2, chuck some money in the pot. I'll get this working. We'll go and fight cancer. So now we've made progress at the back, I'm going to take some of the panels off nearer the front because I really need to see how much of a disaster that exhaust pipe is. Right, so as we take it apart, I can muse about random stuff. Now, one of the questions I keep asking myself is, why did I buy this DeVille? And it turns out if you're trying to spend less than £600 on a motorcycle, there isn't actually a great deal of good choice out there. Now, how does that come off? So the DeVille popped up on the group chat for the people doing the longest day challenge, and I bought it off a chap called Sean, who's a very nice lad, and he's coming with us, and he's bought something else. So even he didn't want to do it on this. But it does fit the bill. I'd been to look at a 600 Bandit, which I thought would be a good bike, because I've ridden 600 Bandits and they're okay. The one I was going to look at turned into a bit of a disaster when you looked at the MOT history, and I talked to the person selling it and he was an idiot, so I didn't buy it. So I nearly bought a GPZ 500, but just didn't. And I also very nearly bought a GPZ 305, and I'm really pleased I didn't because they were crap when they were new, and it's a long way from new. And it actually came in boxes, which is always a little bit of a concern. Apparently it had only done 12,000 miles, and it had to have a crank in it already, because they're a bit like that. So the DeVille came up at the right time, was only an hour away from me, and it was the right price. So the DeVille should be quite the tool for the job. It'll be comfortable, and it should be reliable. Will be very slow though. I don't really do slow very often. I've got a side panel off. It has taken a while because one of the fasteners is hidden down here, behind here, but all the bolts for this are seized, and I don't think I actually need to take that bit off. So it's been a bit of a game. I had to get the Dremel off to cut the head off the other side of this bolt, and there were some tabs and stuff, and that is held on by another screw over here, and for the life of me I can't work out how you're supposed to get to it. So moving down the bike, The fuel tank is propped up because this bit clips underneath the fuel tank. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the fuel tank off, and that'll give me a bit of a view into here. And then I'm going to cry, and I'm going to leave. So not a reason I chose the DeVille, but something I'm very happy has happened serendipitously, I suppose, is that because I've chosen this, I've got a bike with fuel injection. Because all the other options had carbs. And especially now I've been listening to the group chat for everybody else who's doing the challenge, who have pretty much exclusively got bikes with carbs, cheap, old, worn out, rusty motorcycles with carbs are an absolute blooming nightmare. I say as I can't get this tab out of the way that I want to move. Anyway, carburetors and modern fuel are not a good mix. Carbs and old stale modern fuel are even worse, and knackered carbs that have been sat for 20 years in somebody's damp shed with a fuel tank full of rust is even worse again. So I've got fuel injection, even got ABS. Modern technology. Winner. It's a fuel tank off, which means I'm not a million miles away to being able to do spark plugs and an air filter, but there are more pressing matters, and they're down here. So that, with those two nuts on, is the rear exhaust like stub header. And to put the new exhaust on, I've got to undo those nuts. There's not a lot of access. When I say not a lot, it's almost non-existent, the access into there. The annoying thing, a bit like a strip club. You can see it, but you can't get it. So that's a bit annoying. So I'd think that'll do for today. So I may not have got much done today because I've not had a lot of time, but I have at least started. And now I've started, when I get back in on Monday, I have to do more because it's all in the way. Motivation there, you see? Not daft, you know. There is the other side of it of, it's not supposed to be easy. Fighting cancer is tough. Having cancer is even tougher. So if I made this look too easy, you might not give me any money. But this isn't actually going to be very easy. So you need to give me money so that I'm motivated and so that people with cancer can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So come on, press on the link. Do it. My plan to only be away for a weekend and then do some work on the DeVille didn't quite pan out. I'd forgotten quite how busy my schedule has been, hence why I may look a little tired. So I went for a weekend racing at Castle Combe, which was excellent fun. Then there was a full weekend of BSB racing, so I was away with that helping Franco out. And now I've been doing some Northwest 200 prep on my BMW, because I'm not sure when this video's out. But this is Friday, and on Sunday I'm going to Northwest for a week. And then when I get back from that, it's relatively busy with another BSB meeting and stuff before TT. And 10 days after that, we're doing the challenge. It's not quite gone to plan. I may have slightly overbooked my summer. But anyway, irrelevant of the fact that I've had nowhere near enough sleep in the last couple of weeks, we're going to crack on and do something to the DeVille. Right, here goes. I have a 12mm spanner on the nut in there, and my hand up the underneath. And it's not going to be loose, I will guarantee that. Right, there's already a little bit of grunting going on. What I'm going to have to do is use both hands. Right, so now you can see me, but can't see what I'm doing. We can get a bit of a more action on this nut. And it is moving. It actually moved. Right, that's enough success for today. I'm going home. But then I'll have to just do it another day. I suppose I better do a bit more then. Great success. I have a nut there. Look at that. Lovely. The only game, of course, is that I did the one that was easily accessible first. Did I mention I was quite tired at the moment? I now have 2 nuts. Well, I mean, I've always had 2 nuts, but now I have 2 more nuts. So we can put those out of the way. I realised that I could get a swing on the spanner to start the nut off from this side going up the hole. But that did mean I had to take this cover off, and that bolt was seized. But because I don't care about this bike, I just cut that plastic thing off around there, using a big screwdriver basically as a pry bar, because I didn't have a pry bar handy, and a hammer to hit the screwdriver with, so using all the correct tools for the wrong things. I've managed to lever this off the studs, which was relatively well rusted on because, well, it's horrible, and that releases the collar for the header. I already have my new header pipe, but there is a bit of an issue. The end of it, that end, obviously goes into the pipe under here. But there's a piece of old exhaust pipe in there. And so I need to get that out first, which means I need to take this heat shield off, which goes all the way up here. So I think what I've actually got to do is take the exhaust off. But luckily I have to take that off to change the wheel. It's got to come out anyway. Because you have to take the exhaust pipe off to change the wheel, and the wheel has been on off a lot of times because the bike's done to the moon and back, the head off that bolt is already missing. It's been snapped off many years ago. The lander I've disconnected, which was tucked up here, which did involve actually cutting the like bracket that holds the connector off the frame because it was seized. And the bolt for here, for undoing the exhaust, is a stainless one in quite nice condition. It is actually probably the only thing on the whole bike that's shiny. Look at that! I'll tell you what, that is some lightweight engineering just there. Beautiful. You can also hear lots of rust falling out of it. I think we best put this out of the way for a minute. So now I have the exhaust out of the way, I can fit the new piece, which sounds relatively straightforward, except of course there is no access to there. Right, instead of using an exhaust gasket, because there's probably one wedged in the hole, I'm going to put some silicone on it, which is actually surprisingly good at just blocking up the tiny little holes, and then I'm going to get some copper slip on my finger and lubricate the studs, so if anybody ever has the misfortune of owning this bike after me, they've got a fighting chance of actually working on it. The awkwardness of this is the big gap I put my hand in before now has an exhaust pipe in it. But obviously it has to go together, so we shall keep fighting on. Can't get my hand in there, and my hand. I don't have, well, I have reasonably big hands, but not fat hands, and I can't get my hand up there. So I'm going to have to position that there for a minute. Stay. I'm going to go around the other side and see if I can fiddle it in from the alternative direction. Easy for me to say. Look! A new exhaust pipe! This has actually gone better than I expected, if I'm honest, because nothing was that hideously seized that we snapped headers and stuff off, which would basically have involved me pushing the bike outside and setting fire to it. So I think the next thing to do is undo that big nut and work out how this shaft drive thing comes apart. I've worked on a lot of motorcycles in my time, but I've never had to work on a bike with shaft drive. And I had a quick browse in the instruction manual, and it basically said take the caliper off, take the bolt out, and the wheel will come out. Sounds straightforward, but I'm a little bit concerned about the whole shaft drive thing. I don't know whether it needs to come off or whether it falls on the floor or whether many things will come out of it when I take it apart. I suppose there is only one way to find out. It's important to have a selection of hammers, and this is my favourite. This is a half hide, half copper 2 pound. It's a Thor hammer and it's excellent, because then you can hit delicate things quite hard. I'm not saying the DeVille is delicate. Would like to hit it quite hard though. So now if I take this off, right, everything is becoming relatively obvious now, because now the spindle, the caliper and hanger can come out. That means the wheel will be able to slide this way off the shaft drive. Look at that. That's modern technology for you, isn't it? While I've been pushing the bike in and out of the workshop, there's been a bit of an odd noise from the back wheel, and I thought it was just the pads rubbing on a rough bit of disc. Turns out it might be the wheel bearings, because all the balls are at that end. There isn't any at the other end. So I think that's probably worth investing in a new bearing. And if that one's that bad, the one on the other side's probably is similar. So we're going to be changing wheel bearings, which sounds like fun. And the other thing I was going to do while I had the wheels out is paint them. So the wheel was threatened with the shot blast cabinet for a few minutes just to loosen the worst of the crud, and now I've got some spray paint. This is not extensive preparation because frankly I've got better things to do with my life. So I'm going to throw some paint at that wheel and it'll look hopefully slightly less terrible. That's some black paint on a wheel. It will get a second coat in a bit. But if I'm painting one wheel, probably ought to paint the other. So I think it's time to take the front apart. As well as the front wheel needing some attention, because that is literally powder in my fingers, this fork seal leaks quite a lot, and it's been dribbling on things in the workshop. So that isn't any good. That's not very good. The tyre's definitely not very good, and I might treat it to some some wheel bearings as well, because if the back ones are terrible, the front ones probably will be. So I think what we'll do is put a jack under the engine, take some of the weight off the front of the bike, hope it doesn't fall backwards off the bench, take the front wheel out of it. That is 2 wheels painted black, and from a distance they look sort of passable, so that means they're much better than they were before. So even though the bike's in more bits now than when I started, it is progress. We have an exhaust pipe actually attached to the rear cylinder, and I found a problem with the rear wheel bearing. I've got the wheels out, I've got the tyres off, and when the paint's dried and some new wheel bearings have turned up, we can actually put them back in when I've done a fork seal. So there is still a bit to do, but we are going in the right direction. So although I'm staying light-hearted with the project, please remember the whole reason we're doing this is to raise money for Cancer Research UK. So please, please, please click on the link where I've put it somewhere and give me some money. Even if it's only £1. £1 per subscriber would be awesome and we would smash through the total I'm looking for. But anything you can give will be brilliant in helping fight cancer. So thank you for watching and join me again next time for some more DeVille action.